Hello, this is Corey Engelot. Welcome to the End of Slavery Summit. I'm here with a very special guest, my friend Chris Jantzen. He is a carpenter, philosopher, podcaster, and copywriter. He is working on educating folks about natural law, taking the initiative towards positive solutions to the current world problem, understanding the difference between right and wrong, objective morality replacing moral relativity, a father and a friend, one who questions and imagines, a group facilitator, and inspirational speaker and motivational coach. I welcome you, Chris Jantzen. We're going to talk a lot about a lot of these topics and really delve deep into what it means to have teamwork.
Right on. Thanks, Corey, for inviting me to this awesome thing you're creating here. And I'm glad to talk with you today about, well, we'll see what all comes up. But teamwork, the word itself, I think sometimes gets uh, used in a cheesy way, and people make fun of that word. And so I hesitated to use that word. But, essentially, I think that's what we need to talk about.
I agree. I agree. So let's start at that. How essential is teamwork in a world like we live in? Are people really working together or are they not? Do they think they're working together?
Well, that's funny that way you're asking that because that is true. There is definitely um, some, how can we say, a subtle difference. There's a subtle difference in people working together because they're doing something they want to do versus people working together like in a chain gang because if they don't do what they're told, they're going to get whipped. And in so many ways in our culture, in our society, in our governmental systems, even down to school systems, we've taught and repeated this top down authority based way of doing things that is, you do it our way or else. And even voting is that way. Even though people are kind of fooled to think that that means, oh, everybody gets a choice. Really, we live in a world where people are not given choice for so many things they do. But
Hmm.
that being said, that doesn't mean that there aren't people working together, and it doesn't mean we can't see how people get things done and how work gets done. And so we all have seen that in everything we do. Any product you buy, any place you go for services, um, anytime you go to get healthcare, you see examples of people working together. And most of these people are working in these places um, because they've chosen to. Now, there are forces in place that make us all need this money, and that has to do with the overall debt slavery. That being said, within that system, we do have freedoms to choose things we desire and care about. And someone who really likes to work with their hands, like me, I chose to work in construction and do carpentry work. And so I've been lots of times on a crew or a team building something and taking a lot of pride in something I can see we built with our own hands. And I can also see how we did that. And the way we did that was there's different people handling different aspects of the project. And there's organization that goes on. And there is a structure to that organization. And that doesn't mean it has to be by force or with a sword or with a whip. And I can see many times in my career as a carpenter in construction work where people to get work together quite well and can do amazing things. And everything that's been done has been done by people working together. So it's very possible we do it every day. Everything we do comes to us through some type of teamwork. The question is, how much more powerful would it be if we were working on things from a principle based point of view, and we were on the same page, we were working together with people and doing things that we cared about because we wanted to rather than because we had to. Otherwise, we're going to get kicked out and we're not going to have anywhere to live.
Wow. Yeah, really good introduction to that. It's much deeper than the type of teamwork that we just hear, like you said, kind of like just out of maybe the school system where we think, oh, it's just people working together. Like it's more than that, there's people, like you said, coming together because they care about something. They might actually want some sort of change. And so they're doing it out of their heart. And maybe that sounds cheesy to some people, but then if you really like you said, break down what it means to not do that or when there's involuntary interactions. I think that's kind of what you're hitting at, right? It's like you have like voluntary hierarchies and involuntary hierarchies, and they're two separate things. right? So like but and then there's cooperation and teamwork, which doesn't really look like a hierarchy. It doesn't really feel like a hierarchy, right? There might be some people who have special talents or special goals, but they're still working together. Nobody has like, a great claim of ownership. It's not a slave relationship, right? It's not like somebody's chaining anybody up to a wall and say, you have to do this work. It's different, right? It's so that's interesting to me. And you say that teamwork is humanity's most powerful weapon. What is it a weapon for?
Oh, I was looking for a way to make an impressive headline. I'll admit, working on my copywriting skills. How do you get people's attention? We live in a world that's so focused on television shows of things blowing up, and if there's not an explosion and a naked woman on the cover, no one's going to watch the show. So powerful weapon. What do I really mean by that? I mean that in terms of getting things done. Okay, you can if you want to move something, let's say, I'm on a construction job site, you can get a little tiny hammer and you can try to move it like that, or you could get a bigger hammer, big sledgehammer, 10-pound sledgehammer, try to move it like that, or you could get a tractor, and try to move it like that. So
Hmm.
there's different tools we use for different things. And when I think about um, something terrible like warfare, things that have really changed the the way humanity's going in history, what's one of the most powerful things of warfare is propaganda. The words that are used to convince people to go sacrifice their bodies, and risk death. There's no reason people would do that if there wasn't proper propaganda to convince them that it's worthwhile to do that. And so the most powerful, weapon that's used in war is not the bullets or the bombs or the explosions. It's the words that were used to get people to push those buttons and to build those bombs.
Hmm.
And so, in terms of us making a better world in the future and not living in the chaotic, hellish circumstances involving slavery and people forcing other people to do things and coming up with excuses to drop bombs, we could live in a world where we're cooperatively working towards making the best art and building the most fantastic structures ever made and impressing one another with our skills. And I think what people really struggle with is when you and I talk about anarchy, which that word, sends people in the wrong direction. They're confused. But even if you break it down and explain it, anarchy means no rulers. It means no one's in charge of you. No one's owns you. Well, okay, I like that idea, but what's going to happen? Society's going to break down. It's going to be everybody chaos and gangs. We have so many people have these narratives in their head they can't imagine um, what is a world without rulers. And what I'm trying to do is look at that in practical terms. I've seen it over and over in my lifetime on job sites. Um, when people have an accident and everybody gets out and figures out, what do we do? Oh, well, we have to do this and this. We have to get the car out of the road. You know what I mean? Like people figure things out in
Yeah.
situations. And I had a pretty unique opportunity much younger in life where I had I working at a summer camp, and we had a ropes course built there, and the ropes course was used as a teamwork training facility, and we brought groups of kids and young adults through there, and they would learn things about their confidence. But I had this really unique, amazing opportunity to learn the low elements, what we called the low elements, and that was when you take the group out in the field and you learn everybody's names and you do these field exercises, and then you go into the ropes course area and you start doing these like fun challenges. Like one of them, for instance, is a platform, and then there's another platform, and there's a third platform, and we would imagine that it was all full of lava, and you had to get your whole group of let's say 9 people from one platform to the next and to the next, and all they had was one board that didn't reach across. And so I would lead a group there and give them the explanation. Oh, watch out. There's hot lava all around. You have to try to get your team across here using only this. And people would figure it out, and I'd get to watch them figure it out. And leaders would kind of emerge in different groups, and people would disagree sometimes. Sometimes they'd butt heads a little, but they'd figure it out and they'd learn and they'd
Yeah.
learn from it. In a very short amount of time, we could take a group through several elements and they'd become a cohesive group. And by the end of the day, we'd put them up against the wall and they'd all climb over the wall together, like you see them do in the military, helping each other over
Yeah.
And it was very impressive to see that people can do this. It is possible. You don't need someone in charge. Someone Leadership can emerge in different ways depending on who has skills in which application. And so I'm guess I'm looking for a new creative way to explain to people what I see as bridge this gap where they don't think it's possible to move from here to there to get to that peaceful world. That we need violent leadership. That's the only way we could possibly do it, because if we didn't have that, everything would fall apart. And I'm saying, no,
Yeah.
look around. How do we get across a bridge? How do people build a bridge? By working together, and
Yeah.
that doesn't require someone with a whip. It really doesn't. People like making stuff and they like working together. It's part of what we are as humans. That's why it is powerful weapon, because it's naturally part of what we are. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say, like, we each have a responsibility to share something that we know could help people, right? It's like if I have a more obligation to share this information, and I would assume you do too, because we see something perhaps that other people do not see, or we see something that needs to be said. Like you said, like there's a perspective, there's a bridge that you need to gap. So you need to fill that gap. You need to build the bridge. And that requires what? Teamwork within your head, of connecting the dots and making all the puzzle pieces work together, and then teamwork externally, right? Where you're talking to other people, such as myself, or to our audience. It's kind of interesting how that works. Everything just in this life kind of just works together, or is supposed to. And it's interesting because to me it sounds like we're talking about, like, when you mention how natural leaders sort of emerge. I usually call them natural leaders. I call them like real leaders, and I think people respect those people, the people who aren't looking for authority, right? They're looking for influencing others, teaching them, perhaps, encouraging them to be the leaders. Instead of trying to find a way to manipulate them or deceive them, rather a way to help them. I mean, isn't that what a leader's supposed to do? Is say, hey, like, I've gone down this trail before, so I can help guide you in your stride across this trail.
What's really neat is you see that in the trades. Like a good example is on a construction job site, being a carpenter. A new guy comes on the job site, carpenter I've never met before, right? And there might be a little bit of tension in the crew, like, who's this guy? What's he all about? But, within the first hour, you see what he's doing with his hands and his tools, and you see, oh, you know what? This guy knows what he's doing. And what he's doing is actually making all of our life easier. And pretty soon, we see something this guy's doing that we haven't been doing before, and it's helping the whole project move along. And so this guy all of a sudden becomes a natural leader. It could be his first day on the job site, but because he has skill and knowledge and he can show it in a real application, we all don't need to know that he has years of experience. We can see that he has the practical knowledge and skills and he's applying
Mm.
them. So we immediately start following this guy, right?
Willingly.
Because he's built our respect, because he showed us he can nail this thing together faster than the way we were doing it. And I think, the truth is that people are going to be leaders, natural leaders, in different things in different ways, depending on what problems arise. If you and I were out on a boat together, and you have a lot of boat skills, I'm going to rely on you a lot. But then all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I'm not that good with directions. I'm like, oh, I'm great on that. So I'll be the leader on that. You know what I mean? Like, so um, it's really about learning to communicate and deal with other human beings, and to find out what those skills are and to
Yeah.
coordinate what those skills are. But there's a lot of obstacles between getting to that point and even getting people on a team, to even get people on the same page.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at, especially as a community of people that care about truth, a community of people that care about freedom. It sounds like this community you're describing to me about law, that they have already found some cohesion,
Yeah, the
and they're
common law
already
assembly.
working on practical solutions, and probably delegating jobs, and
Yes.
probably seeing who's good at what, and saying, hey, this is what I know.
Yeah,
Here's what I have to contribute.
they got
And someone else
committees.
does, right? So that's the type of thinking and organization I want to see start coming into the groups that we work on, with the natural law, with the freedom, with truth.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I totally dig that. I mean, I agree. I think that's powerful. Like you said, and kind of how you approve through your your analogies, is that, like, you see that across everything in life. Like, we kind of need some sort of level of organization or teamwork in order to get things done, especially big tasks like this, right? I mean, I would say it's a pretty big task trying to free the whole world or help them understand these concepts such as morality or freedom when so long people have been taught in schools to kind of disregard these notions or think it's all subjective or just replace it with politics or other things and kind of not really question morality, not question what brings us together, rather focusing on what divides us. So isn't that interesting? It's like, how could we have teamwork if we're so divided and fighting each other's ideologies all the time, or really nitpicking on everything and not finding where we actually excel, and embracing that uniqueness, I think. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you just reminded me. I wasn't going to bring this up, but there's a book I listened to a couple years ago, 80/20 principle.
Hmm.
This Pareto principle, the idea being this guy discovered this commonality. I think it started out with city populations or something, but it turns out it's in almost everything we do. That when you're looking at where do you put your energy, the way we take this 80/20 rule and make it practical for our lives, is we look at where do you put 80% of your energy, and is that where what are the results, the things you're doing that are getting results? Is that, well, most of us, we spend 80% of our time getting 20% of the results. But what you want to do is the other way around, is you want to find the times and the energy of the things that produce the most results, and put your energy and time into that. I didn't say that as well as I would have, as eloquently as I would have liked, but this is something that I'm looking for in my own life too, and it has to do with focus. Um, and here's a good example that might work better than the book, but I do recommend 80/20 principle. Maybe it'll make more sense to you
Yeah.
if you've read the book or you get that separately. The way I'm applying it in my own life is trying to do things that are more effective. I guess that was the point of that. Um, but an example I wanted to share is like I've worked on this podcasting thing for quite some time. I know you have as well. And podcasting can be kind of frustrating because you put a lot of time and energy into creating things. And then as hard as you try to share those things, it's hard to find the audience, really, especially if you're talking about like what we are, morality or philosophy, right? There's not a huge amount of people that are, just waiting for your next video, waiting for the next philosophy video or the next morality video. And so I put a lot
Hmm.
of time into certain energy and then get frustrated with, okay, I'm not seeing a lot of results for all the energy and time I put into this. And then now compare that to the funnel conference, for instance, where I got together with some other friends that I met on some of the same groups that are talking about natural law, other people that were watching the Mark Passio videos. And we worked together and we said to ourselves, hey, what can we do as a group? And we all met a presentation, and we put all these presentations together and put it into a conference. And in that conference, I got way more communication with other people. I got way more remarks on things I had to say. Some of the first times I actually got somebody giving me um, contribution to the websites, like all of a sudden things happened, so I put the same amount of energy in, but I got a lot more results out, and what worked was working together with other people, you know, and creating an event, and all of a sudden I realized, okay, so how we go about things makes a huge difference. If you're trying to
Hmm.
do something all by yourself, you're trying to build a house by yourself, it's going to take a really long time. But if you get some people to help you and happen to have some people that know particular things, one guy's a plumber, one guy's a metal guy, boom, 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 the house is going to come right together.
Yeah.
In a recent presentation I did, I showed a picture of the Amish because the Amish have um, been noted to be able to build a barn like within 48 hours or within 24 hours. They just the call goes out and they're not even using the phones. I think they're just yelling, "Hey, Bob, we're gonna build a house. We're gonna build a barn next week."
Mm.
And pretty soon they got 400 guys there, and the thing's done in a day.
Yeah.
And that's the way we can be getting things done.
Yeah.
It's possible.
As a human species, not even limited to just, certain cultures or religions, right? Because I mean, we see that across a lot of different groups, and um, look at like how they're doing. I mean, they thrive, and when we're divided, it's like we're kind of confused. We don't really know what we're doing. So it's interesting, to use the Amish as an example, or the Mennonites, or other groups that are kind of similar, or kind of offsprings of different ways of thinking. So yeah, I see that, like we kind of talked about integrating people together, and it's kind of why I create this event, right? Is to bring speakers together and to bring people together. I thought it was actually really much necessary. If you think of a lot of celebrities out there online, it's like, how did they get famous? They usually, most of them, if you think about it, a lot of them had connections. They had it through somebody they knew. They got an audience that they tapped into. They networked with other people, and that's technically teamwork. And so I definitely agree. Like, people have to come together. That's why I create this event, and I'm doing the newspaper as well, so I can encourage people's voices. Lately, I've just been saying, like, hey, if you need help, if you want to produce content, let's do this together. And I think that's definitely a very useful thing to do. And perhaps, like, because you talked about how people could also be believing to do the wrong thing. Like, in the case of war, people might come together, be propagandized into doing the wrong thing. So it's kind of like, well, there's a bunch of people who are working together, but not for the right cause. They're doing it because they believe it's true, or they believe it's right, perhaps, but it may not actually be right. So I think it also depends on the cause, right? Because we can come together, but what we're putting that energy toward or into, like you said, is what really matters. Am I right on that?
Oh, yeah, and like we were saying before, it is a weapon, right? When you have people working together, that can create. That's how we actually create weapons. People work together and they make weapons. And our military is some of the best examples of people working together in a very efficient manner. You got to give it to them. Other groups don't know how to perform action the way that military does. But, that's not the way we wanna be going about things, and our goal is not to destroy or, to harm others, But we can look at how they get things done, and we can learn from it, right? And
Mm,
and and as far as that goes, look at the most evil things in the world. Those of us that you could call conspiratorial, those of us have done some research and looked into, you know these families, that these shadow governments behind governments, and then these shadow groups behind those, these occult um, families with this history of enslaving their fellow human beings. They're um, they're doing a really good job of organizing themselves, and they're doing a really good job of keeping their stuff fairly secret in many cases, and pulling off big jobs. And so what are they doing that we're not doing as people who are good and don't want to harm other people?
mm,
Well, it's tricky. That I think that's confusing to people in some ways. They're like, how could the world be run by evil people? The world's good, right? Well, like, I grew up in religion. I went to Christian churches, and my memories of Christian churches, there's a lot of good memories. I love the community aspect. I remember being at church camp. I remember being playing with the other kids. There are a lot of good aspects of church. However, that being said, there was always the propaganda, right? That's built into every religion, where you're being asked to take things on faith. You're being acted to expected to take stories as being true that sound suspicious. For instance, that was something that stuck out to me. So, um, starting a whole new way of doing things based on principles and based on morality without religion just seems impossible to many people. And I think it's partly because they haven't ever heard that that's a possible way of doing things. But one example that comes to my mind, partly besides the Amish, is just many people that were early settlers here in this country who had to survive, and they needed each other, right? You needed a family to rely on. You needed other people to stay up and keep an eye out for the animals, or it's just a lot of things we can't do alone. And as we're going forward here in the future, we're going to find out that it's going to be harder and harder to survive as society breaks down, as things go wrong. I mean, it's just a matter of time till things get more and more difficult, if people continue to act the way they act, which is immoral. And people are going to eventually be forced to recognize this morality problem, but that could take a long time. In the meantime, what I'm talking about is it is almost virtually impossible to convince somebody that they need to understand morality, or that they need to understand it different than the way they grew up and were indoctrinated in, let's say, a religion. It's just not that easy to do, if it is possible. People have to realize on their own. But
Yes.
what we can do is we can communicate with other like-minded individuals that already understand and that we can agree with, that there is a such thing as morality, that there is such thing as objective truth. If we can sit on that common ground, then everything else from there we don't have to really agree on specific details and points.
I
We
agree.
can work from that common ground. Without that common ground, I don't think we can create a team that's going to be effective. We're working towards evil,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Especially
we
in light
need
of
that.
slavery.
That's the focus. you know.
Well, yeah, especially
That's,
with in light of slavery, right? Like if here's let's put ourselves back in the 1800s, especially, right, where you have overt chattel slavery, and people are like, well, hey, this is immoral, this is unjust. Well, and then there's a bunch of other people who are like, well, we need to keep this system for the economy, for this reason, for that reason. They start bringing the conversation to all these other ways of talking, and it kind of goes away from morality, but the moral issue is at heart. And within that, you had abolitionists of all kinds, people who, believed certain things and other people who believed other things, but they all agreed that slavery was wrong. And so it had to be abolished. Kind of interesting. Yeah. So I definitely agree. Would you say like freedomcells.org is like a good networking website for people?
it's like any other tool. It's how you use it. I used freedomcells.org, and I met a friend. This was during a period of time when I was kind of in a rough transitional point in my life. I moved from one area to another, and I looked on the map and I found someone nearby. And within a month of moving to a completely new area, I made a friend who very much shared with me a lot of views. And this was right during the time of COVID, and he was right on the same page with me. He was not liking going in stores, and he didn't want to wear a mask. He didn't think it was right. He thought um, it was like a terrible thing to see people being so fearful of each other, and to be fearful being close to each other. And he just knew there was something wrong with this whole situation. But he was kind of like new to a lot of this stuff. And he met me, and here I'm somebody who's been looking into um, the problems in the world for quite some time. And so, um, we formed a cool friendship, and we from there we formed a little freedom cell that we were building, and it turned into 3 or 4 people, and we were meeting every week. And so, and I'm still in contact with that person. It's very difficult to keep something like that going. Um, After you get people together a few times, they start having personality conflicts. Um, it's really difficult to keep a group together and to keep it cohesive. That being said, that's not a reason not to try it and not to do it.
Right.
It's also the only way to make friends and long-term relationships, is to reach out and to take those risks.
Hmm.
And so I would say use it. Use anything you can, you
Yeah.
know. And I found out some of my best friends that I meet with every week in my natural law group, they had lived within half a mile where I lived before, where I was completely alone and I knew no one. And I thought no one, around me understood natural law or truth. And I had been living less than a mile away from these people that felt the exact same way. And I didn't even find that out until I moved away, you know? And I've heard other stories. Autonomy is a good example. I got involved with Autonomy, Richard Grove's program. It's another way to network with people. And I met people in Autonomy who were like practically neighbors. They had been studying the same work for years, and thought no one else around knew what they were talking about, and find out their very next door neighbor was right into the same thing they were into. So you don't find out until you try. So I would say, freedom cells is one way to do it. Facebook, as much as I hate it, it's another way to meet people. That's where I met, um, one of the most wonderful people in my life is the woman I'm with now. I met her through Facebook, and I didn't even like social media. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So use social media. use the newspaper, use whatever, Craigslist, whatever it takes to
The
meet
truth is the
people.
truth, right? It doesn't
You know,
matter where
right?
you share it.
But you got to get yourself out there, and you have to push yourself through some nervousness and meet someone new and take a risk, you know? And it takes doing that. And I get nervous, even though I'm an outgoing person. Sometimes I don't want to go meet someone who I've never met before, but I know it's worthwhile, and my good friend who I met through freedomcells.org, the first time we met, he took me paddleboarding, and now I go paddleboarding all the time, and I love paddleboarding, so it just
Yeah.
goes to show it's possible. You can make friends, you can build foundation, and you can find opportunities, but you gotta be brave, and you gotta take the initiative to try to meet people and advertise somewhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Somehow.
And that's creating the free world, right? Ourselves. Like that's putting it into action, like showing like, hey, this is how we can have a free world. At least that's how I look at it. Um, it's amazing. Like like you said to me before, and we talked a little bit before we did this, the Common Law Assembly and what they're trying to do, bringing people together. And just to reiterate again, like there's no violence involved. People are coming together voluntarily on their own fruition. No one's coercing anyone into doing anything, and that is what separates it from, slavery or government or these organizations, which aren't so much organizations or businesses or voluntary hierarchies. There's false presumptions, there's titles and authorities that we're giving people, right? It's very different from the natural leadership that we're talking about here, where people actually are respected for their influence and people look up to them and they're being trained and taught, and there's teachers involved. Like it's like a doctor too. The word doctor comes from teacher. It's like they're not supposed to necessarily tell us what to do with our body. They're supposed to teach us what's going on, what's wrong, how could we perhaps heal ourselves. I mean, only I can truly live in this body. This is my real home. So what is people doing their own job versus like people doing the one great work? Because right, there's this thing we call the one great work, and I don't know if you want to kind of describe that and compare that. Like, is that different from people's everyday so-called job, and which one is really going to help us here?
Well, everything is part of everything else around it. And, I'm sure you've seen my end evil. I use the symbol of the tree of life because it describes well that all things are interconnected. Um, the one great work has been something that the way I see it, it is an individual job. Um, me talking about people coming together and doing things together is kind of the next step in a way, because in order for that to happen, like I said, for me to meet somebody else, I have to take that initiative and put the call out. And so what is me putting that call out? It's me having the bravery and the groundedness to be able to stand up above all the other heads and say, "Hey, I have something to say that's of value that needs to be heard." How do you get there? Right? Well, you get there by doing work. And just like anything else, you don't make progress unless you do the work that it takes to do that. Okay. And so what it actually means is self work. And this is like the most universal wisdom of all time, that talk about common ground. Almost anyone will agree that some of the best wisdom in the world is know thyself. You know, almost everyone will agree with that. Until we know ourselves, how can we help other people, right? And just like people drowning in water, if you're not on solid ground and you try to help someone drowning, they're going to pull you down too.
Mm.
So in order to do something in this world, we have to be on some sort of solid ground. And so I guess what I'm getting at is, what I really see the one great work as is why we're here, why we're on this universe, why we're on this reality, is we have something to figure out. Each of us does. We have a journey to go on, and that's a spiritual journey. The material is a way for us to experience it. It's time is a way for us to experience it. Our body is a way for us to experience it. The other people that we communicate with is a way for us to experience it. Nature is a way for us to experience it and to learn from it. This is reality. This is us working through reality, is learning how to be a better person, learning how to be a good person, learning how to understand the reality that we're in and what binds it together. And what it turns out is if you're paying attention and you do that work, whether it's meditation or walking through nature or helping people that are sick, those are the type of things you do that are like work thinking. What what did I do there? Was that the right thing to do? Why does it make me feel bad? You know,
Hmm.
when we go through that type of work, that is the great work, right? Because we're trying to find what's the greatest thing in the universe, what this is all made of. What's the reality? What's the one true thing? Well, it's that we're here experiencing it and it has reality and that we're having this opportunity to be part of it. So each person has a job to do, a responsibility, and a mission to be on. And you can pretend you don't and say you don't want to believe that. But nature and reality in this universe is going to drag you through those lessons one way or another. you know, Even if you try to pretend it's not happening, it's still going to happen. And so, anyone that becomes self-aware, and that's the symbolism of the eye, right? Opening the chakras, people have different ways of describing it. When you become aware, what you realize is that you're part of the great tree of life, and that you have a responsibility to be part of that. And what's cool about that is in there, there's ultimate freedom. You can do whatever you want. You know, it's not just like one path for you, and you only fit in one hole. That's
Hmm.
not reality. Reality's not like that. It has
Right.
this thing called freedom. You can do screwed up things. You can go out and rape and kill and pillage. You have the freedom to, but you're going to have really terrible results. When you go out and pillage or rape, you're going to have people that really don't like you and they're really mad and they really want to kill you, and
Hmm.
you really deserve it.
Yeah.
So the great work is seeing what reality is and aligning with it and seeing what you can do to make it better and to be part of the great tree. And so I really see it in this life as each person becoming the best version of themselves that they can be. And that's the only way that you're going to make teamwork work either. Is because if you haven't done that inner work, that great work from inside to figure out what reality is and how you align with truth, then when you get together with other people, you're gonna have a bunch of problems. You're not gonna be able to get along, because you
Yeah.
haven't really done that work first. So you haven't gotten to the point where you can stand above the crowd and be like, "Hey, I got something to say." So
Yeah.
that's the first part of the great work is knowing yourself, getting to the point where you know that you have something that's valuable to say, and then saying it out loud so everyone can hear it. And then we can start the people that are saying that can start working together on making something happen to help the rest of these people out that aren't getting it.
Yeah. And another thing I was thinking of when you were saying like sort of for people to be conscious or to think internally about themselves, to know thyself, is this idea that if you don't know, you won't say no, right? Because you're not making a conscious decision for yourself, understanding what it is you should or should not do. So in order to say no, instead of just saying yes or whatever comes to you, and you're just like, okay, I'll just do it. I'll just follow what everyone else is doing. Oh, that's the easy route. I'll just do what everybody else is doing. No, actually taking the time to sit back and say, well, is that actually a good choice? Is that a good decision? Am I contributing to violence by paying this tax? Am I contributing to violence by supporting this authority? Does this authority have any legitimate real authority? Does this piece of paper have any legitimate authority? Like we really have to sit back and reflect and like, is that natural? Is that moral? Is it truthful? And these things kind of interrelate, I would say. So you talk about 5 activities, and of course, people can see it on the screen as well. I'll have it shown. There's 5 activities you have in a PowerPoint presentation that is provided for everybody to download. I recommend people check it out. And activity number 1 says to start a list. Activity number 2 says self-work. So that's where you talked about self-work. So that's number 2 after you start a list. So what do you take making a list of? Is it just potential things that you are working on? What is it exactly? Could you kind of fill us in on what are you starting a list for? Why does that become before self-work?
Um, when I was putting that together, I was thinking of some tips, and they're not necessarily in order of importance,
Okay.
but I was just kind of thinking of them in terms of some practical steps you could take, right? But the list might actually help with which direction you go with your work. Because let's say, for instance, like, what are things I'm interested in? You know, I like working out. I like running, let's say. I like reading, right? Those are the type of activities that I know I can do. Hiking, you know, um, paddleboarding. That those are things that make me feel good, and they're things that are good for me physically, right? And when I get myself in a better physical place, then I have a better mental attitude. I can do better in the world. So, making a list of some of the things or places where I might be able to meet people too, right? Other people that like hiking, other people that like paddleboarding. What kind of places would they go to hang out? What kind of places online would they form groups? So this is giving you opportunities and ways to connect with other people, and the self work is going to be something that we're going to do before, after, and during these processes. So
Right.
I'm
So
not
some of these
necessarily saying.
activities can be interlinked then. Yeah.
And you know what? Meeting with people is going to be self work, because you're going to find that, like I said, forming a group is extremely difficult in today's world. People are very
Mm.
fractured. People have their own life going on, their own problems, and they're used to doing things their own way. And when you try to get people together, they start having conflicts. And most of us aren't used to dealing with those conflicts very well. So it's going to be an ongoing process, as far as the self work. And
Yeah.
what I've found is when I meet people, each person I meet has a little lesson for me to learn. And even
Yes.
the people that are difficult for me to deal with is a lesson for me to learn. And if you look at it that way, it's a lot easier to deal with people.
Yeah. And I think, some people might actually need help from other people once in a while, right? Like I might need to reach out for that extra hand. They might be looking for people who are like-minded. And that's why, we can provide them with some resources and a little bit of inspiration because there's a lot of people I run into and I talk to, and they're like, oh, I don't think I'll run into anybody who thinks like me. And like, oh, I don't think anybody in my community thinks like me. But little do they know, I talked to somebody next week who lives somewhere around their area. I'm like, "Are you really sure about that?" Like, I think it just takes a little bit of effort, and you could find somebody, and even if you go places where you don't expect, I went to political parties. Like I would go to all sorts of different meetings and I would find people and there'd be at least somebody who'd be willing to listen, who cared enough about me as an individual to listen to me. And that's all I need to really say like, "Hey, I'm speaking from the heart." That's all I'm doing. And they can sense that. They can feel that. They're in touch with their senses. They're not stuck into necessarily the systems or the strict way of doing things. Like you said, they're not necessarily just on that one path. They're open-minded, so not that they're like too constricted in their worldview, or not that they're too open-minded. They're willing to learn. And so I look for those individuals who are willing to learn. And sometimes I think, the work and stuff we put out online kind of attracts those eyes, the people who are interested. So it kind of does its own work and it's always out there forever. So, I think it can help, and especially through the generations. I mean, this could last forever. So it's interesting. So you have start a list, right? Then you got self work. And I'm just reading from the activities that were from your presentation. Reach out and touch someone. That was kind of what you were hitting on with, like, hey, you got to make sure to reach out to people and find teamwork. And I think, like I said, I think that could help a lot of people, especially in today's world, if people are being socially isolated or they don't have enough people who are like minded or care enough about them. I think I've definitely met great people such as yourself in this community. I never expected to meet you, Chris, but you're a great guy. I met you and other people, and I could sense the heart, the soul, and just the way you speak and the way you present yourself. It's very nice. It's grounded, and I think there's a lot more people like that out there. I didn't know like I said, I'd run into any of these people. So another one that you say says ask for help. I think that's kind of along the lines I was mentioning, where it's like you might need somebody to help push you up. And how many times were there people in our lives who taught us something that we didn't know, like you said, or showed us a path, like this knowledge that we never saw before. The school system never taught us, or maybe our parents, our teachers, and it's like, wow, this is really interesting. And then number 5 is join something. So join something, yeah, like Freedom Cells, like we mentioned, or the Common Law Assembly, and there's probably many other organizations, right? There's a lot of people who are starting things as well. I have a movement, of course, I started. We have the One Great Work Network. If you have any other recommended resources, you can feel free to share. But Yeah, what do you think about that? Is there any resources you think people should be aware of when it comes to this? Is there anything about these activities that people need to look at? I know that there's a lot of internal work that people have to do, but what can really help in their process? Is there a certain book, a certain meditation? What would you recommend?
You know what comes to mind right now? I've been obsessed with talking about this with people because it's made such a big difference in my life, and that's like really small things. Okay, there's a book I read called Atomic Habits, and I really highly recommend this book. But it shows up in quite a few other formats. There's like the high performance habits, and a lot of these kind of big salesman speakers will talk about these things we can do to power ourselves up and to get things done in practically in life. But I've told this story over and over of 7 push-ups, where I wanted to start doing regular exercise, and I had never been consistent about that most of my life. And I decided to start being that way. And so I started doing 7 push-ups every morning. For me, 7 push-ups really easy because I'm skinny. I'm lightweight. And so I was able to do 7 push-ups, no sweat. And I just kept doing it every day, every day, every day until it became so normal that I get up and do 7 push-ups that I started like, "Oh, you know what, I can do 17, I can do 20. And, I do 100 push-ups every day now. The point is here, you got to take a small step. And it's what I'm going to call taking the initiative. And that's what we called it in the ropes course too, when we would take people on those the first little adventure. We would call it, the initiative. We were going to take people on this initiative. And it's funny because that same word shows up in the world of occult. If you want to become an initiate, and part of becoming an initiate is to stop lying to yourself, right? So it's really, that's the self work part of it, right? But when you get past to that and you're moving forward to this next step of reaching out, like I'm saying, to meet someone, like it's kind of what I'm saying. Make a list. Think of a couple things you can do. What's one practical thing you could do tomorrow? You could go post a comment on your favorite podcast and say, "Hey, I'm looking for anybody who wants to talk about this podcast Thursday nights." You know what I'm saying? That's a pretty simple thing to do. You can take your own initiative. You can set up your own meeting. Hey, I started a server channel. I'm looking for anybody that likes popcorn and hiking and natural law. You know what I mean? Whatever it is,
Sounds
that's
good to
kind of what
me.
I'm saying. You got to start somewhere. Think of something you like. Think of something that other people like, and connect on that thing. Then you got a connection. That's the first thing. Okay, can we connect on another thing? Now we got it like a plane. Now we got a playing field. Now that's something we can work with. It doesn't work with the first one, let them go, get another one. You know what I mean? But you got to make that connection. So I guess what I would say is just start small. The atomic habits thing is the 7 push-ups thing. Is like you start with something you know you can do that doesn't push you so far out of your comfort zone that you want to give up, but you can see yourself doing. And so, but you got to actually do it. And so you got to, I would say, start with something on that you can do daily, that you can implement, in the morning before you get up or before you go to bed. I'm going to do one little video of me talking, and I'm going to post it on Instagram. you know I'm going to make one friend by the end of the year. I'm going to post in 3 different places, right? There's somebody locally in your town or your city that is ready to discuss these things with you and work with you. You just have to find them, which means you have to take some small step. And so, resources, I talked about autonomy. That was something I discovered. The One Great Work Network, something we're both part of, and I would recommend. Um, the Freedom Cells is another one. And then from there, I would just recommend whatever social media you use, create a group, invite people. And then the other thing I think is an awesome resource is podcasts. Almost a lot of the podcasts I listen to, people within the podcast have formed communities and they meet in some form or another. And so I think that's a great way to meet people and to get together with people and form community.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so would you say there's any actions that you don't see being done by like independent media, a lot of content creators out there that you would like to be seeing uh doing? Because I create a movement. I see that there's a lot of people who can come together and, like we said before, unite among like these ideas of just freedom, really basic morality ideas. Is there any particular action that you would recommend for independent media or content creators that you would like to see more, or people who do have an audience?
Well, what's really difficult to see always is that, most content is based on the news cycle. It's really focused on the big theater, and I'm really trying to get away from that. I'm trying to encourage people to really end the discussion about whatever political BS is going on and bring the discussion towards what do we do in our day-to-day lives and what's right and what's wrong. That's hard though. For being a content creator, you're trying to get people's attention. So they're trying to bring up subjects that people are going to be interested and show up for. So I guess given that that is still part of the game, I would just encourage anybody and everybody to bring it back to morality, bring it back to the core principles, and break whatever you're starting the topic with at the end, break it
Mhm.
back down to what do we actually do about it,
Right.
you know? And what really matters for the future generations of people and the future generations of humanity. What's right just because it's right, not because it's what feels good or what's not scary.
Good point. Really good point. The fact that they can like break it down and really get to the root cause of it, rather than just covering the news or just covering what floats to the top. I definitely agree with that. So, how did you kind of come to understand what you understand? Because obviously, I mean, you've put out a lot of different presentations and podcasts by now, and it's cool because we kind of like started out together in my content too. So how long were you a statist, would you say? And when I say statist, I mean somebody who believes in the legitimacy of government or authority and believes that somebody has the right to rule over you or your property. How long were you a statist, and how did you get out of that? I kind of like to ask a lot of people this question.
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm 46 now, and I'd say when I was in my late 30s was when I really started looking into um, the ideas. I think 2012 for me was kind of a big year, and it was. I mean, I was disturbed by 2001 when I saw what happened on 9/11, and I was always a questioning type person. I was always like I was left in a room for 2 days with the Rubik's cube, and I figured out how to make solve it. That's the way my brain is. I don't when someone gives me a riddle, I don't want the answer. I'd rather work on it for 3 days, even if I have to get out a paper and take notes. I want to figure this stuff out. I've always kind of been that way. Always been the kind of person that wants to know why. I don't
Yeah.
just like the easy answer. So I've always kind of been that way. I've always been a little bit of a rebel, and high school was really tough for me for that reason. But yeah, I remember saying "Go Obama." Let me put it that way. I thought I still kind of had some hopes that maybe Obama was going to bring some change or something, and so that was about the shifting point for me. Though it was about that time where I was already looking into a lot of this stuff, and so it was about 10 years after 9/11 that I really started digging into that, and that was kind of what opened the curtain for me because then I got into weather engineering from there, and that really shook my world up. And for me, what really shook my world up wasn't me realizing, oh, they're spraying stuff in the sky. That was really a difficult subject, and I was really having trouble even deciding at first whether I believed that was true. But what really broke things open for me was noticing the way people reacted when I tried to discuss that
Hmm.
subject or discuss 9/11 and be like, why does it, what about this? What about that? Why is this plane doing moves a plane shouldn't do? Why did this guy's passport survive? When you start asking some of the hard questions and people avoid the topic or don't want to discuss it, or you say, well, why are these planes flying like that? Why are they making circle shapes in the sky? That doesn't make sense. If they were just flying, why would they do that? And then people were shutting me down, not wanting to have the discussion, not open enough to ask these questions. And so that was what made me really realize, like, wow, I didn't realize just how asleep people are. And that was kind of like what cracked my whole world open. And so Yeah, for me, that really started happening around 2011, 2012. And then ever since then, by the time COVID came along, I was like, I was ready for it. I was starting to put out my own reasons why you shouldn't wear a mask in like the first couple months of COVID. I was like, as soon as they first started doing it, I knew it was wrong immediately. And I knew a lot of reasons why it was wrong. So, yeah, I guess that's kind of been my path. Some of those big events that I researched and saw that these questions have no answers and that most people don't want to know the answers. Um, it shook my world and it made me look deeper and deeper and deeper. And I had to keep asking, why? And what I've realized is the ultimate answer is the reason why is because people don't understand the difference between right and wrong. And that really is what it boils down to, is that we're out of balance with nature. We're out of balance with the law as humans, and we have the ability to get in balance. And
Hmm.
that's why things are chaotic and screwed up, because we're out of balance, you know?
Yeah, I think it's amazing how I'll talk to all these researchers, and I'm a researcher myself, and how we've come to this conclusion. One based in philosophy, one that's not based in necessarily like all the research and here's the evidence and history. And no, like we came to something based on our natural reality, something that we can observe and understand for ourselves. It doesn't require internet research. It just requires a little bit of spark of looking around the world and realizing how people react, like you said. I think that tells us a lot about our world, just the way people act, the way people react as well. So when we say something like slavery and say it's still existing today, people may be like, "Whoa, what are you talking about? Oh, slavery doesn't exist today." And it's like, "Are you sure about that?" Like all the abolitionists back then actually said it's not just chattel slavery. There's more to that equation, and we had it for thousands of years. And it's amazing to me how fast people are just to say, "Oh no, it's already done away with," as if the school narrative is just to be taken as truth. And nothing else happened. The Civil War was totally a war that everybody wanted. Abraham Lincoln was totally a president everybody wanted. It's like, yeah, no, back then they even had conflicts just as much as they did
Well,
today.
and think about the progression. You do agree. Someone will agree that there was a time when there was slavery, right? Well, what happened before that time? What led to that slavery, right? Wasn't there a process, that got people in that position? Isn't it possible that we're in a process like that? Is that where you want to end up again, in that type of slavery? Maybe that's what's happening. And it's like looking at the trends and thinking about how people got into the position they got in. And it's kind of the same thing with anarchy. There have been times in history when people got along really well without a bunch of rulers.
Yeah.
Um, it is possible. It is possible, and it can happen again. It is happening right now in small pockets, of the world. So it's partly our imagination of what's possible, and it, and it and for a large part, for each of us, the great work is taking the initiative, doing something with this amazing gift we have, this body, this mind. You have it. Use it.
Yeah.
Put your energy into asking the why and what should I be doing, and the answers will come.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think we'll leave it at that. Didn't you do a presentation on slavery? If you want to share that with people?
I think they all all my presentations touch on slavery in one way or another, but
Probably.
I'm not sure which specific one you're talking about. Oh,
Yeah.
there was one called The Grind where I
Yeah,
talked
that's
a lot
one.
about
That's the one I'm
where I
referring
was
to.
trying in The Grind, I was really trying to show how our jobs wind up being slavery, and just kind of like show the gritty truth of that as much as I could. So yeah, that's a cool one to check out. You can see all my stuff on endevil.life. All my podcasts are posted there. But I'm on YouTube and Facebook, and you can also find me on the One Great Work Network. Um,
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely recommend everybody check out Chris. Your work is fantastic. I saw the grind one. That was the one I was referring to.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chris, for joining me. I'm going to conclude it right now. Like I said, if anybody wants to check out your work, that's Chris Jantzen. So that's Chris. Last name is Jantzen, Jantzen. Check out the downloadable resource as well. And there's many other speakers like Chris out there for this summit. Thank you very much for joining us. Go to nita.one/summit, nita.one/summit. This is the End of Slavery Summit. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.